Welcome to the podcast summary of Mangalorean Catholics. Today's story is really about how a community gets made over time, through migration, trauma, rebuilding, and a lot of cultural adaptation. Mangalorean Catholics trace most of their ancestry to Goan converts who moved south, but centuries in Canara, the shock of Tipu Sultan's captivity, and later recovery under British rule gave them a distinct identity of their own. Along the way, their Konkani changed, caste habits lingered inside Catholic life, and a very local blend of faith, food, language, and ritual kept evolving even as people spread across India and the world. The starting point is migration out of Goa between the 16th and 18th centuries. These were mainly Goan converts who left for a mix of hard reasons: the Goa Inquisition, warfare involving the Portuguese, the Adil Shahis, and the Marathas, plus famine, epidemics, taxes, and social discrimination. They moved into South Canara, where the Keladi rulers welcomed them as skilled agriculturists and gave them fertile land. That mattered a lot, because it helped turn them into a strong Catholic landowning community while they still held on to Konkani and a lot of Goan-derived customs. By one estimate, about 95% of Mangalorean Catholics are of Goan ancestry. But ancestry isn't the whole story. After centuries in Canara, they were no longer simply understood or understanding themselves as Goan Catholics transplanted south. A distinct Mangalorean Catholic identity had started to settle in. Then came the event that seems to have marked the community more deeply than anything else: the Seringapatam captivity under Tipu Sultan. Beginning on Ash Wednesday, 24th of February 1784, roughly 60,000 Canara Christians were deported to Seringapatam. The journey itself was brutal, around 200 miles through the Western Ghats, and what followed was worse: imprisonment, torture, forced conversions, military conscription, and the destruction or seizure of churches, homes, and land. The captivity lasted until Tipu's death on 4th of May 1799. So this was not a short, sharp episode. It stretched across years and generations of memory. Some accounts estimate that only 15,000 to 20,000 emerged as Christians at the end. That experience became the community's defining collective trauma, and it also helped crystallize a shared identity that was no longer mainly organized around older Goan affiliations. After Tipu's defeat, survivors began making their way back to South Canara with help from British officials and Catholic clergy. They worked to recover estates and rebuild community life, and you can see that recovery in the numbers, from 10,877 Christians in 1800 to about 19,068 by 1818. Over time, the community prospered under British rule through farming, coffee cultivation, trade, public service, education, and the Mangalore tile industry. Even then, most families still had some connection to agriculture, which helps explain why land, harvests, and village life remained so central to identity. A later turning point came in 1878, when Italian Jesuits took over the Mangalore mission. They expanded education, healthcare, and social welfare, and institutions like St. Aloysius College, founded in 1880, helped shape an urban professional class alongside the older agrarian base. The Konkani spoken by Mangalorean Catholics tells its own version of this history. It kept a Goan core, but after migration, it absorbed Tulu and Kannada vocabulary and structure, and it came to be written in the Kannada script. It also carries a noticeable Portuguese layer, roughly 350 to 400 loanwords, with more than half of them tied to religion. So even in everyday speech, you can hear the route this community traveled: Goa, coastal Karnataka, Catholic institutions, local neighbors, all of it mixed together. This dialect is broadly intelligible with North Goan Christian Konkani, but it differs from South Goan and Goud Saraswat Brahmin varieties. That's a nice reminder that migration doesn't just move people around, it redraws linguistic boundaries too. Jesuit scholarship later gave the language a stronger literary base. Angelus Maffei published a Konkani grammar in 1882, and the first English Konkani dictionary in 1883, and later writers, periodicals, and Bible translations helped keep the language active on the page, not just in conversation. One of the more complicated parts of this history is caste. Conversion to Catholicism did not wipe away older social divisions. Broad caste groupings like Bamons, Chirotis, Sudirs, and Gaudis continued inside a Latin Catholic setting. Historically, those divisions affected marriage and even who would dine with whom. So the idea that conversion automatically erased caste really doesn't hold up here. Catholic identity coexisted with inherited surnames, occupations, marriage rules, and social hierarchy carried over from pre-Christian communities. At the same time, those boundaries weakened over the years through education, land reforms, intercaste and interreligious marriages, migration, and movement away from farming. Land reforms in the 1970s also changed the picture, because former tenants could become landowners. And that shifts more than income. It shifts status. Like a lot of coastal communities, Mangalorean Catholics became highly mobile. Successive waves moved to Mumbai, Pune, Bangalore, and other Indian cities, then to the Gulf, Britain, North America, Australia, and beyond. One genealogical estimate suggests about half still live in Mangalore or nearby towns, with roughly 15% elsewhere in Karnataka, 15% around Mumbai, 10% in the Gulf, and 10% spread across the rest of India and the wider world. That mobility opened doors, but it also thinned out some older cultural forms. Younger generations outside South Canara are often English-speaking and more Anglo-Americanized, and things like traditional cuisine or the old network of small Mangalore stores in Mumbai have weakened. Still, the community's cultural blend remains pretty vivid. Montifest on the 8th of September ties the Nativity of the Virgin Mary to the blessing of new crops, which is a beautiful example of Catholic devotion meeting the local agrarian calendar. Wedding customs like Ros, Sado, Pirduk, Vovio, and the exchange of betel leaves preserve Konkani and Hindu-derived forms inside Catholic ceremonies. And then there's the food, which may be the most persuasive archive of all. Sana Dukra Mas, Rosachi Kadi, Patrode, Christmas Kushwar. You can almost map the whole history from the table. The heritage is also being consciously maintained. In 2008, Konkani Nirantari set a Guinness record by sustaining Konkani hymn singing for 40 hours, beating a 36-hour Brazilian record, which is both impressively devotional and, honestly, a serious test of vocal stamina. So this is a community shaped by exile from Goa, devastation at Seringapatam, recovery in South Canara, and then another long chapter of education, migration, and reinvention. What holds it together is not one single thing, but the layering of language, memory, ritual, land, and movement. And maybe that's the clearest takeaway here. Identity can stay rooted even when the people carrying it are constantly on the move. This episode was generated by Podkey. Create your own at podkey.fm.